Thanks, Chair. Taoiseach, on the 19th of October of last year, President von der Leyen made a speech in the European Parliament, and she said, Russia's attacks against civilian infrastructure, especially electricity, are war crimes. Cutting off men, women, children of water, electricity and heating, with winter coming, these are acts of pure terror, and we have to call it as such. Then when Israel began to do precisely that, attacks against civilian infrastructure, especially electricity, cutting off men, women, children of water, electricity and heating, precisely what Israel is doing to the over 2 million people in Gaza, what did President von der Leyen do? Did she call it as such? She did not. She went to Israel, she spoke about the right of Israel to self-defence without any conditions. She gave a green light to precisely that happening against the people of Gaza, against the Palestinian people. Taoiseach, I want to ask, why do you think that the European Commission and the European political establishment in general has such double standards when it comes to condemning the war crimes of Russia, but not condemning and in fact giving a green light to the war crimes of Israel?
Thanks. Again, I want to thank deputies for the questions. Just in relation to the whole question of foreign policy, the European Union doesn't have a single foreign policy, and each member state has its own foreign policy, and that's very evident when you look at different positions and different actions by the 27 member states, depending on the case. We try from time to time on a case-by-case basis to have a common policy. We've done that fairly successfully in relation to Ukraine, but there are dissenters like Hungary, for example. When it comes to Israel-Palestine, I think it's going to be very difficult because different countries are coming from very different perspectives when it comes to this issue and it comes to this conflict. We were able to agree compromise language, and that was the basis of the European Council statement there the weekend before last, and we will try to do the same, I think, over the course of the next 2 days. And I'm sure on Thursday and Friday in Brussels, we will discuss cooperation with Israel. And at the moment, as we all know, there is very strong support for Israel from most EU member states. But that could change, and that will depend on how Israel acts in the coming weeks and months. And I think President Biden described it very well. He said the events of October 7th in Israel was their 9/11. They were attacked, civilians were killed in huge numbers, and it came as a huge shock and huge trauma to the Israeli population. But the point that he made, and I think it was a very valid one, he said to Israel not to make the same mistakes that the US made. And I think it's very clear what he meant, because the US made terrible mistakes after 9/11, which caused a lot of hurt in a lot of parts of the world, and I think impacted on their influence. And I think the point that President Biden was making to Israel, if you read between the lines, was a message of restraint, and one that we will be making as well. Just in terms of international law, our view as the Irish government is that collective punishment, deliberately targeting civilians and targeting civilian infrastructure are breaches of international humanitarian law, no matter who does them, and we've been very clear and consistent on that. I can't speak for the President of the European Commission or other member states, nor would I, but I do understand that other member states come from different perspectives. And let's not forget why so many European Jews had to emigrate to their ancestral home in Palestine, in Israel. It was because of what was done in Europe, particularly the Holocaust. And a lot of countries feel historic guilt because of their involvement in that. And we have to understand that. And we also have to understand that when it comes to extremist Islamic terrorism, the supernova event in Israel wasn't the first concert to be attacked by Islamic fundamentalists. Let's not forget what happened at the Bataclan in Paris. Let's not forget what happened in Manchester. Other countries come from a different perspective on this, and we need to make sure that we understand their perspectives, even if we don't disagree with them, and guard against, in particular, rising anti-Semitism and rising Islamophobia, both of which are happening at the moment in Ireland and Europe, and really concern me. And we also need to not forget that in our own country, war crimes have been committed. And war crimes were committed in the name of the Irish people, although we always rejected that. And we mark only this week the 30th anniversary of the Shankill bombing, a war crime if ever there was one. And we need to be consistent too in our condemnation of war crimes, particularly when they're done on the territory of Ireland or done by people who claim to be acting in our name. Just in relation to the whole issue around international alliances, and I think it's a very valid suggestion that we would try to build an international alliance that looks for a ceasefire first and looks for a peace initiative later. But to have any influence, we can't take absolutist positions. Once you take an absolutist position, your influence is gone, unless you have other forms of power, and you can't be an honest broker in that kind of scenario.
Thank you, Taoiseach.